Have you ever wondered how close you've come to danger without even realizing it? At Shivering Vault, we take you there, one story at a time. But before you drift off, consider liking this video, commenting where you're watching from and at what time, and subscribing to keep these chilling stories coming. Now, let's dive into these unsettling tales. This happened a few months ago. I'm 19, and my parents went on a week-long work trip. They left me alone in the house, which I wasn't thrilled about, but I was also kind of looking forward to it. I had the place to myself, no one to answer to, no curfew, just me in the house. It was supposed to be a chill week. The first night wasn't too bad. I stayed up late, just playing video games and watching TV. Nothing out of the ordinary. The house is pretty old, so sometimes it creaks a bit, but I wasn't bothered by it. I've lived here my whole life, so I'm used to the sounds. But then something caught my eye around midnight. I went to grab a drink from the kitchen, and I noticed the backyard gate was slightly open. I'm talking like just enough to make me wonder if I left it open earlier or if the wind had blown it. I stood there staring at it for a bit, trying to figure it out. I convinced myself it was the wind. It's a big wooden gate, so it probably just shifted a little in the breeze. I wasn't going to freak out about it. I went around and double-checked all the locks on the doors and windows. I don't know, maybe it was just my nerves getting the best of me, but I kept feeling like someone could be out there watching me. I laughed it off, told myself I was being stupid, and went back to my game. But yeah, that weird feeling didn't go away. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound that made me freeze in bed. At first, it was so faint, I thought I was imagining it. But then I heard it again. It was a soft noise, like something light brushing against the walls or the floor, kind of like the sound of feet shuffling. My heart started beating faster, and I tried to tell myself it was just the house settling. But it didn't stop. I sat there in the dark for a few minutes, trying to figure out if it was real or if I was just freaking myself out. Then I heard a creak, like the sound of a floorboard giving under weight. I was sure now that it was coming from downstairs, and it was loud enough that it definitely didn't sound like the house settling. I was wide awake now. My mind started racing, and I just couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I slowly got out of bed and crept over to the door to listen more closely. After a few seconds, I decided to take a look. I turned the knob as quietly as I could and cracked the door open just enough to peek through. At first, I couldn't see anything in the dark, but then I noticed a shadowy figure standing in the hallway. I froze, my heart dropping into my stomach. It was a tall figure. I thought maybe it was just a shadow, but then it shifted. Not much, just enough to confirm that it was a person. I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to pass out. But I forced myself to slowly, quietly retreat back into my bedroom. I knew I had to call someone. I grabbed my phone, trying not to make any noise, and dialed 911. I whispered to the operator, trying to explain what was going on without making too much noise. I was so scared, I barely even noticed what I was saying. All I could think was get help. She was calm, which helped me a little, but told me to stay in my room and not to confront the person. I remember her telling me over and over to stay on the line, that help was on the way. While I was on the phone with her, I could hear the figure moving around downstairs. The sound of footsteps. I couldn't tell if they were coming closer or moving farther away, but the idea that someone was walking through my house while I was hiding in my room made my skin crawl. And then I heard the footsteps on the stairs. The stairs creaked, one step after another. I tried to hold my breath and stay as quiet as possible. I couldn't risk being heard. I heard the figure come up to my door. They tried the doorknob. I swear, my heart was pounding so loud I thought the person could hear it. I was stuck there, not knowing if I was about to get dragged out of my room or if the door was going to burst open. But just as they tried the handle again, I heard sirens in the distance. The figure paused, then backed away from the door. I heard the sound of a door slamming downstairs and the heavy footsteps retreating. The person ran. By the time the cops showed up, the place was silent. They went through the house and didn't find anyone, but they did confirm that the back gate had been tampered with. The cops said it was probably a random break-in attempt, but I don't know. Something felt off about the whole thing. It's been a few months now, and my parents are back home, but I still check all the doors and windows before bed. I work as a night security guard at a local storage facility. It's a pretty standard job, just sitting in a little booth watching the monitors, making sure no one's messing around. Most nights are uneventful. It's usually just the occasional car driving by, maybe a raccoon knocking over a trash can. That's about it. But a few months ago, something happened that still gives me chills when I think about it. I started my shift around 10 p.m., like usual. The place is pretty quiet after hours. The office is in the front, and then there's the back lot where all the storage units are. It's pretty dim back there, especially in the corners where the lights don't reach. I'm not exactly scared of being alone, but yeah, it gets a little eerie after midnight. Anyway, I'd been watching the CCTV cameras for a couple of hours when I saw something weird. It was on camera 4, which shows the farthest part of the lot. I was half paying attention, but then I saw it, a person, just ducking behind one of the units. Now, I didn't panic right away. People park their cars back there sometimes, or sometimes a tenant might be late picking something up, but something felt off. The person was moving like they were trying to hide, not like someone casually walking to their unit. I couldn't see their face, but I could tell they were wearing dark clothes, blending in with the shadows. I turned up the volume on the monitor and watched closely. They crouched low, moving between the storage units where the lights were dimmer. No car was in sight, and there were no other people around. It was just them. I felt this knot in my stomach, but I wasn't sure if I was overthinking it. I grabbed my flashlight and decided to go check it out. I didn't want to risk just calling the cops for something that could turn out to be nothing. Besides, if I could just see who it was, maybe it'd clear things up. I grabbed my radio, made sure it was set to the right channel, and headed out to the lot. The night was colder than I expected, and the parking lot was empty except for a couple of delivery trucks. It felt unnervingly quiet. I walked around the front row of units and slowly made my way towards the back corner where I'd seen person duck behind the units. It was pitch black back there, just a few weak floodlights casting long shadows. I kept my flashlight low, not wanting to attract attention in case I was walking into something I wasn't prepared for. As I got closer to the corner, I noticed something that made my heart skip. There were cut locks lying on the ground. Several of them. I froze for a second, scanning the area with my flashlight. No sign of the person. The locks weren't just random. These were the kind of locks people use to secure storage units. I knew because I'd seen them in the footage earlier. These were freshly cut, and there were at least 4 or 5 on the ground. I felt my pulse quicken. The person I'd seen on the CCTV was definitely up to something. I quickly radioed it in to the local police, telling them what I'd found and that I suspected someone was trying to break into the units. They told me to stay put. I stayed in the corner, just out of sight of the lot, trying to stay as calm as I could. I didn't want to get too close to the units in case the thieves were still around. It felt like forever, but eventually I saw the flashing lights of the police cars. They parked a little ways down the road, and a few officers got out. They made their way over to where I was standing, and I pointed them in the direction of the cut locks. They took a quick look and then started moving between the units, quietly checking each one. A few minutes later, I saw them quietly handcuffing 2 men, both of them wearing black hoodies, just like the person I'd seen on the CCTV earlier. Apparently, they'd been sneaking around at night, cutting locks and trying to break into the storage units. The police caught them just as they were getting to the last unit they planned to hit. I later learned that these guys were part of a small ring of thieves who'd been targeting storage facilities in the area. They'd break in, take whatever they could, and be out before anyone noticed. But that night, I'd caught them before they could do any real damage. The police gave me a thank you and said that my quick thinking had probably saved a bunch of people from losing their stuff. I felt a little proud, but mostly just relieved. I've been a security guard for a while, but this was the first time I'd ever been involved in stopping a crime. Honestly, I didn't expect to ever be in that position. Anyway, I haven't seen anything like that since. I still work the night shift, but now I'm always a little more alert when I'm on camera duty. I still think about that night every so often, and it gives me this weird feeling when I'm walking the lot alone. It's a reminder that you never really know who's out there in the dark. I guess I'll start by saying that I work late shifts. I'm a night owl by nature, so it's not a big deal for me. I get off work around 11:30 p.m., sometimes later, and my commute back home takes about 15 minutes. I live in a pretty quiet suburban neighborhood, one of those places where everyone pretty much keeps to themselves. I've gotten used to the stillness, but that night, that night was different. It was probably around 12:15 a.m. when I pulled into my street. I noticed a car parked a few houses down near the end of the block. The car was a bit too close to the curb, and what struck me as odd was that the headlights were off, but the engine was running. Normally, people leave their headlights on if they're sitting in the car. I thought maybe the person was just waiting for someone, but the whole thing felt off. There were no other cars nearby, and no lights on in the house it was parked in front of. I just shrugged it off and didn't think much more of it. Like I said, it's a quiet neighborhood, and sometimes people park like that if they're waiting for a friend or something. So I drove into my driveway, turned off my car, and went inside my house. I locked the door behind me, made a quick sandwich, and watched a bit of TV. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then it was time for bed. I turned off the lights in the living room, checked my phone, and went into my bedroom. As I was getting into bed, I noticed the curtains in my bedroom were slightly parted, just a crack, enough to see outside, but I never really paid attention to it before. I went to shut the curtain completely, but then I froze. I could see flashlight moving around my backyard. My first thought was, maybe it's just some teenagers messing around, but the movements felt deliberate, slow, almost as if they were searching for something. I didn't make any noise, just watched through the crack in the curtain, trying to figure out what was going on. That's when I saw him, a man wearing a ski mask. I couldn't make out much more than that, but the figure was definitely tall, and the way he moved, it made my heart skip a beat. I stayed completely still, holding my breath. My mind raced. Was he trying to break into my house? I'd heard stories of people creeping around like this, but this felt different. I quickly jumped out of bed and checked all the doors and windows. Locked. All of them. But just to be safe, I grabbed my phone and called the cops. My hands were shaking, and honestly, I didn't know what to do. I just kept staring through the curtain, hoping the guy would leave. But instead of leaving, he kept circling the backyard, like he was trying to find a way in. I couldn't see his face, but I swear, the way he moved, it was almost like he knew exactly where the best points of entry were. Then I heard it. A soft click, like a door handle being tested. I couldn't believe it. He was trying the back door. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I just stayed there, glued to the window, praying the guy would move on. But he didn't. Instead, he tried the side window next. Then the front door. This guy was methodical, checking every possible entry point, even trying to force open the basement window. I kept the line open with the 911 dispatcher. I couldn't talk too much, so I just whispered, giving them updates as quietly as I could. They said someone was on the way, but it felt like hours before I heard the sirens in the distance. And then, just like that, everything went quiet. I kept my eyes trained on the backyard, but the man was gone. No more flashlights, no more movement. I don't know if he heard the sirens or if he just decided to give up, but I didn't see him again. The cops showed up a few minutes later, and of course, by then, the guy was long gone. They searched the neighborhood but found nothing. No tire tracks, no sign of anyone having been there. They asked if I was sure, and I told them everything I'd seen, but they just said it was probably someone who got scared off. Still, they took a report, and the next day, I made sure to double-check every lock, every window, and every door. They offered to patrol the area more often, but honestly, I've been looking over my shoulder ever since. I don't know what that guy wanted or if he was just messing around, but it felt way too deliberate for me to brush it off. I know it might sound paranoid, but it's been a few weeks now, and I can't help but feel like I was almost targeted that night. Every time I walk past my backyard, I half expect to see someone lurking in the dark. This happened to me last fall, and I haven't gone back since. I was staying at my family's old cabin up in northern Pennsylvania. It's a little wooden place tucked way back off a logging road that barely even shows up on GPS. We've had it for years, and I've gone up there plenty of times to just get away from things. No cell service, no internet, just trees and quiet. Anyway, I was up there by myself for the weekend. I had some college exams coming up and figured it'd be a good place to focus. Just me, my notes, and some coffee. The weather was getting cold and it was already getting dark early. I spent most of Saturday bundled up inside, going over my notes, trying not to fall asleep. I had the little wood stove going and a lantern on the table. It gets real quiet out there at night. Like no bugs, no wind, just silence. Around maybe 10:30 p.m. or so, I was still up, flipping through a notebook when I heard something that didn't make sense. Tires. Like gravel crunching under tires. Now, this cabin is about a quarter mile off the main logging road. You'd have to really know it was here to find it, and nobody, and I mean nobody, comes down that road after dark unless they know you or they're lost. My first thought was maybe it was one of the neighbors. There are a couple other cabins further up the ridge, but they're usually empty this time of year. I turned off the lantern, not really thinking, just instinct, I guess. I went over to the window real slow and peeked out, but I couldn't see much from that angle. You can't see the dirt road directly from the cabin, but I could hear the car slowing down, then stopping. Then nothing. Like, no doors opening, no voices, no engine, just the car pulling in and then silence. I stood there for a minute, waiting to hear something, but it was just dead quiet again. I remember thinking maybe I imagined it or maybe the wind messed with the sound, but then I saw a flash of light through the trees. Then another one. 2 beams, slowly moving, sweeping the ground. Now my stomach dropped. That's not normal. No one comes out here like that, especially not without announcing themselves. I ducked away from the window and killed the stove light. The inside of the cabin went pitch black. My eyes took a second to adjust, and all I could hear was my heartbeat and my own breathing. I moved to the opposite window, the one facing the back of the property. I crouched and peeked through the bottom corner, and that's when I saw them. 2 men. Couldn't see their faces, but they both had heavy coats on, and they were slowly walking around the outside of the cabin. One had a flashlight, the other was carrying something, like a crowbar or maybe a tire iron. They weren't talking, just walking, circling the place real slow. I don't think they knew I was inside. At least not yet. I backed away from the window and crawled toward my backpack where I had my emergency satellite phone. We keep it up there just in case someone gets hurt or we get snowed in. I grabbed it and quietly called the ranger station number we keep written down by the stove. Took a few seconds to connect, but someone picked up. I whispered to them what was going on, told them my name, gave them the address, and tried to stay calm. The guy said to stay hidden, stay quiet, and that they were already sending 2 forest rangers who were in the area. Now I just had to wait. I sat there in the dark, behind the couch, holding the phone. I could hear them outside, tapping on the windows, slowly checking each one. At one point, I swear I heard the back doorknob jiggle. They were trying to see if it was unlocked. I don't know how long it was. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour. Felt like forever. I stayed perfectly still. Then I heard a crack, like glass or wood from the back corner of the cabin. They were trying to break in. But just as quick, I heard shouting, then boots, then someone yelling, "Hands where I can see them." Lights everywhere. Flashlights, headlights, voices shouting commands. I stayed put until someone knocked on the front door and identified themselves as forest rangers. I opened the door slowly, and they told me they caught the two guys in the act, trying to pry open one of the kitchen windows. Turns out, those two had been breaking into seasonal cabins up in that area for weeks. They'd drive through after dark, looking for places that were obviously empty. They didn't think anyone would be at ours, especially not in the off-season. I gave my statement, and the rangers stayed with me for a bit until they were sure everything was safe. I packed up and left the next morning. I've lived in the same apartment complex for almost 2 years now. It's a quiet place, kind of older, but decent. Nothing fancy, but it's safe. The kind of place where you don't hear much from your neighbors unless someone's moving out or something. I usually like the peace and quiet, especially since I work long hours. Anyway, I'm a pretty laid-back person. I don't mind being by myself, so I wasn't bothered by the fact that I lived alone. I'd just get home after work, maybe order some food, watch some TV, and go to bed early. That's basically it. Nothing ever happened here that was weird. Until one night. It was around midnight. I was just lying in bed, scrolling through my phone when I heard the buzzer. The one for my apartment. It wasn't the usual time for any deliveries or guests, so I was immediately confused. I looked at the clock, 12:03 a.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. I leaned over to the intercom and pressed the button. "Yeah?" The voice on the other end was low, but clear. "Hi, this is maintenance. We're handling a leak issue on the floor above you, and we need to come in and check your apartment." At first, I thought maybe I was just half awake and not thinking straight, but something didn't sit right. We didn't have any maintenance notices posted, and I didn't hear anything about leaks in the building. I asked, "I didn't request anything. Are you sure you've got the right apartment?" The voice on the other end hesitated for just a second before responding, "Yes, this is the right unit. We're handling a leak on the floor above, and it's urgent. We need to come inside and make sure your unit isn't affected." I was still confused. I know buildings like this tend to have maintenance issues sometimes, but I wasn't really expecting to get a late-night knock, especially for something I hadn't been informed about. I still hadn't heard anything from my neighbors, and if there was really a leak, I figured they'd have sent a notice or even emailed us. I replied, "No, I really don't think I've been notified about anything. I'd like to double-check before I let anyone in." The guy on the other end didn't sound annoyed, but the tone in his voice changed a little. "Listen, this is important. We really need to check your apartment. It'll only take a few minutes." That threw me off. I don't know why, but his insistence felt off. Maybe it was because it was so late at night, or maybe because the maintenance staff had never shown up unannounced like this before. I decided to take the safe route and told him no. I said I'd call the office in the morning to figure it out. But the voice didn't give up. It just kept talking. "We really need to come in," he said again, more forcefully this time. "I need to check for the leak. It's urgent, and it could affect your unit if we don't handle it now." That's when I started feeling uneasy. I was silent for a second, then said, "Sorry, but I don't think this is right. I'm not letting anyone in tonight." There was a pause. Then the voice came back, still calm, but a little more forceful. "Look, this really needs to happen now. If we don't get in there, you could be in trouble." I was starting to feel a little panicked. The whole situation felt wrong, but I wasn't about to let some stranger into my apartment at midnight. I pressed the button to cut the conversation short, but just to be sure, I decided to call the security desk at the front. It was a 24/7 service, and I'd called them before for simple things like guests or deliveries. I picked up the phone and dialed, my fingers a little shaky. The security guard answered. I explained what had just happened, and the first thing he said was, "No one's working maintenance tonight. There's no maintenance scheduled, and no one is supposed to be going around like that." I felt a wave of relief, but also a sudden coldness. Someone was trying to get into my apartment, and they weren't supposed to be there. I thanked him and asked if he could check around the building. He said he would, and he promised he'd keep an eye on things. I didn't hear anything else for a while, but I stayed awake for the next hour, staring at my door, trying to make sense of it all. The next morning, I found out more when I ran into the building manager. Apparently, someone had been going door to door, pretending to be maintenance, trying to find unlocked apartments. They hadn't broken into any yet, but the security guard confirmed they'd checked multiple units. They'd even buzzed a few people on different floors. When I asked how they caught the guy, the manager said they didn't know exactly who it was, but they'd gotten a report of a suspicious person lurking near the back entrance around the time I had the interaction. It's unsettling to think about how easily someone could have walked in if I hadn't cautious. That's it for today's tale from Shivering Vault. If you have a story worth sharing, drop it in the comments or send it our way. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your fellow thrill seekers. As always, the Shivering Vault thanks you for unlocking today's tale. Until next time, the vault awaits your return.